What's up, guys? We need to talk. I'm gonna get some water. If you have some water, pour some water for yourself. Otherwise, I'll pour some for you. Just kidding. Welcome to the channel. It's Chad. In this video, I want to talk about my personal experience working in tech sales, my honest experience working in tech sales. I think that's what the title is. But as someone who's been in a startup environment in tech sales, as well as currently in a very structured, large organization in the tech industry, I really want to just share a bit about my experience working in both, and kind of if you're someone who's looking to maybe get into remote tech sales or doesn't really know a lot about the industry, hopefully this will get you an idea of kind of what it's like in the role. And I'm just going to keep it casual and just chat with you. That's kind of like how I like these videos, so I'm not going to go super structured, but I did write some notes down, so I'm going to be looking at that. First, I want to rewind a bit before I got into tech sales and kind of just let you know what was going on. So 2 years ago, I think it was like 2 years ago, I was stuck in a job that I got right out of college, and it's kind of when I was just like figuring stuff out, right? I got my degree, I knew I wanted to get a job and I wanted to put it to use, and it was good. I'm grateful for what I got. Through a friend, I was able to land a first like professional role. It was more like a data entry role where it was a great experience, but I couldn't really see myself there long term. And it was at this time that I was really starting to think of what I wanted to do. I didn't know. So I had tried a lot of things. I even got a job working in an office where I was kind of like in a call center, and I was doing like a sales and customer service role, which was great, and I was getting a ton of experience. But I realized that I was more the type of person who liked a little more freedom and flexibility. So if this is you, this is one of the things about remote tech sales that might be interesting. But I really liked, I found my way, like, I learned about remote tech sales through networking with some people. I joined like some online groups, honestly, and networked with some people there, and that's how I learned about remote tech sales. And basically, it's remote sales jobs are out there. You can work for a lot of different companies and different industries, but tech specifically is a very fast-paced industry that is at like the forefront of where the world is going, and every business uses tech. So it's a great industry if you're a beginner and looking to work remotely, since they operate basically pretty much all of them operate somewhat level remote, right? So you're going to have more flexibility, more time on your hands, and a little bit more freedom. So that's the first thing, and kind of like story about how I got into tech sales. And I just knew that like being in an office wasn't for me. Doing work that wasn't really in line with my skills or my vision for my future wasn't for me. And I found out that I'm a very entrepreneur-minded person. So the reason I was drawn to sales was because learning that like sales is really foundational to entrepreneurship. So you're basically, all sales is learning how to present the value of your product or service, identify potential people out there that have that problem, and communicate the value effectively to them and make that transaction of value. So if you're someone who wants to start a business down the line, learning sales in a company that is structured and has good best practices you can follow is great to get that foundation laid. And maybe you don't want to build a business down the line. Maybe you just think it's a good career for the reasons of having good commission, where you get paid based on your results and the effort you put in instead of like an hourly rate, which was another reason why I decided to land a role in remote tech sales. I want to get into like some day-to-day stuff and chat and help you get like an overall understanding of what the role is. What do you do? What do you do in a remote tech sales role? What does it look like? Is it fun? Is it cool? Is it hard? I'm just going to share a bit from my personal experience. I've been in tech sales for just about a year now, in this specific kind of like where you're calling people or sending emails and hopping on calls with people, and like basically the entry level roles for remote tech sales. It's called a sales development rep, or an SDR. You're going to hear the word. You might hear business development rep, BDR. It's essentially the same thing. All you're doing is communicating with potential customers for your company, and getting them on a call, setting them up with specialist or an account executive or whatever your company calls them, and basically they doing that. You're setting up a discovery call as a SDR. Um, maybe it came from an inbound lead. Maybe you reached out to them, but basically the day to day of the role is like finding people to reach out to that are potential fits for your product, communicating with them, and identifying a problem that they might have that your solution solves, and getting them on a call to where we can discover if it might make sense for them to move forward with the product. So that's essentially, it's an amazing skill first off, but that's essentially the day to day of the role. And there's a lot of stuff out there about people worried about quotas and stuff like this. So I'm going to cover a bit about that too. But I want to touch a bit about being in a startup first, because I think questions that some people have is like, what's better, to work in a startup or a structured organization? I've done both, and I want to say that my experience working in a startup earlier on in my sales career, it wasn't as easy to hit the ground running. It wasn't as easy to, there was less leadership or support from my experience, and it made it a little bit harder to learn as a beginner. So if you're someone who's just maybe even, not even that I was like a complete beginner, but even just they don't always have the same processes in place to help you succeed. So it can be tough if you're early on. I think it's a great opportunity if you have the skills already and you're really good at the job and you like the idea of working in a startup where you can grow with the company and build those processes. But in my opinion, it's a bit more difficult if you are starting out, and I would recommend getting in a company that has at least like 200 to 500 employees or more, or you can go into the top leagues where it's like in the thousands. So that's my take on the startup versus sorry guys, I'm blanking, versus structured company. All right, let's talk about quotas now. So my experience in a startup, I didn't really have like a high quota, given that the company was still building out its processes and everything. It wasn't like such a, there wasn't such like a push to hit a strong quota, just because everybody was kind of on the same page with that. We were still figuring things out a bit, and we were doing what we could and making sure that we got, we had KPIs, but in terms of like the very specific quotas, like delivering meetings or booking meetings and stuff like that, it wasn't really like that. But if you do get into a structured company, they have more set quotas, and oftentimes they're very fair, right? These companies have been, some of them have been around a long time, and they know what's reasonable for the beginners, and a lot of them will put them on a ramp where you don't start out like hitting the full quota. They'll ease you into it where they won't, they don't want, because you don't need so much experience for some of these entry level roles, so they're not really just gonna, from my experience, throw you in the water right away per se. So from what I've heard and experienced, is a lot of them will give you some little like window room to learn and onboard and ramp up into performing the role and hitting the quotas. And what's cool about it is if you overperform, you get compensated for it. And that's one of the things with the sales role like this is you can really make what you put in. You get what you put in. So that's what's cool about it. And I'll touch a bit about the remote aspect now. I love working remote because I can pick up and just go with my laptop. If I want to do some work at a coffee shop nearby, I literally can. If I want to go across the U.S., I literally can. Now, a lot of people think that, so in the tech industry, you have a ton of freedom. If you're in a remote role, which there are a ton out there, they don't really care where you are as long as you're getting your work done. Now, that's within reasons. You do have to work with them on like the time zone. You can't be in like a completely different time zone that doesn't work for their business. But it gives you a lot of leeway of where you can go and where you can set up base. Maybe you want to go on an Airbnb. Maybe you want to go on a road trip and you want to stop at hotels or Airbnbs, and maybe you want to travel, which is what I'm going to be doing a lot of, and I'm going to be documenting some of that because I think it's something cool to do, and it's really what I wanted to do and one of the big reasons I got into tech sales. So allows me to have this freedom. I also like not having to commute to a physical space because it gives me a lot of leeway to work on stuff that is important to me, like making YouTube videos on here, building my channel, building my online brand and stuff like this. And I didn't really have as much time to do this, or I would, like in the past when I had an office job and I was still doing stuff, but it was a lot harder. I was waking up super early and having to get stuff done before I had to hop in the car to drive to work and then get home late. I think that over time, being in a remote role gives you so much freedom if you're someone who wants to build something for themselves in their own future. And I'll leave it out. I'll leave you guys with this. Anything worth doing is worth doing well, and anything that is valuable isn't necessarily super easy to obtain. And I will say that when you start out in a role, if you're completely new to sales, it's going to take a little bit to ramp up. And don't get me wrong, if you get into a good company, they're going to work with you and help you get to where you need to be skill-wise to do it, and things get easier. But there's a learning curve to everything, and this isn't one of those jobs where you can just sit there and like tap a couple keys and essentially you can do that, but it's not one of those jobs. You do have to put effort in, but it isn't one of those traditional jobs given the flexibility of being remote and everything and having that freedom. And I will say I enjoy it a ton, and I love putting effort into something where I know it's really paying off in terms of gaining skills and even getting rewarded for my performance as well. So I'll leave it with that. If you're someone who's interested in breaking into remote tech sales, I've personally done this multiple times, and I've done it. I've been in sales for a long time, so I know the ins and outs when it comes to getting a good role that you can have that flexibility that I was talking about. So if that's something that you're interested in getting some help with, I have a call link in the description. You could scroll down and click, book a call with me, and we could chat to see if that makes sense for you. Otherwise, hope to see you in another video. Chat out. Peace.